All right. What is going on, everybody? Thank you for being patient with us, waiting a few more hours than usual to check this out. This is this week's Metal Blade live series podcast. I'm your host, Riley McShane, singer for Allegiant, and I am here with Trevor Phipps of Unearth. Fucking the man. How you doing?
Do well. Yourself?
Doing good, man. Doing good. Hanging in there. Fucking all things considered, fucking the usual.
Thank you for being patient with my, inability to work modern technology. So,
Dude,
but
I'm
we're
right
here.
there with
We're
you.
finally here.
But now here we are. We got it going. Everything's all good.
Yeah, man.
So, I guess diving right into it, Unearth, you know, you guys have been around for a minute. You're formed in '98. You've got 7 studio albums. Last one from 2018. It's called Extinctions. What, I guess, was it like being like? Because gonna toot your horn here for a little bit. You guys are an incredibly influential band to like the metalcore scene that blew up in the early 2000s. Um,
Thank you.
and you guys have kind of been there through it all. You know what I mean? Starting in '98, kind of before that shit really hit the fan. With bands like At the Gates coming into popularity over here in the States, and people just being like, "What is this?" and all these bands kind of spawning out of that. Um, all the way up to now, where you're seeing almost kind of like a metalcore, like revival type of thing, at least in these past few years. Um, what has that kind of been like for you, seeing everything kind of from the beginning to where it is now? Um, you guys have seen stuff like, especially being East Coast guys, right? From like Mass, you've seen the rise and sell of Ferret Records. You've seen the Ozfest US East Coast Hellfest, New England Metal Hardcore Festival, which is hits me right here in New England Metal Hardcore. That was like my first tour ever. We played that festival. So yeah, man,
Great fest.
yeah, it's a good
We'll come
fest.
back one day. I think just
Yeah,
taking a little break.
yeah, I think so too. I think that these metal fests, unless they hit that like huge international kind of level, like Hellfest and stuff like that, that they kind of off again, on again. But yeah, man, I'd love to hear more about what the scene was like in the early 2000s and how you think it compares to now.
I mean, compared to what it is now, I mean, I'd say it's bigger now for sure. It is cool to hear a lot of the similar sounds to what we came up with. Like you hear bands that got really popular the past few years, like Power Trip and Knocked Loose. They're they're their own thing, of course, but there's definitely elements of what came from the mid to late '90s, and you can hear it in there. It's just a throwback, but also with a modern twist. So it's really cool to hear those sounds in their songs. There's so many other bands that are doing this, but for us, we started as a young band in the late '90s, and of course, like every other band before us, we're just influenced by what we grew up listening to and what we had slugged it out in the clubs as kids, being influenced by other local bands. And we were lucky enough to be from New England and more notably Massachusetts, where we had a lot of great bands around us. You had Sam Black Church, you had Overcast, you had Cave In, Only Living Witness, a whole bunch of others. Man, the list goes on. Slapshot for hardcore. So we would go to these shows as fans, as kids, and we would ingest this music. And we also grew up mostly as almost exclusively thrash metal kids, and we found the hardcore scene. And then we started to branch out and hear bands from Syracuse, New York, or Buffalo. You'd hear Earth Crisis, Snapcase, and then even in the later '90s, you had bands like VOD, who are, I would say, a big influence on Earth's early writing. But also then you had the Swedish sound, like At the Gates and Flames. It's just all stuff that was just hammering our ears, and it worked its way into our writing, and a bunch of other bands at the same time where all came together. I would say that's where that modern metalcore sound came from. Was just a combination of all these bands that were great before us all, that we just kind of mixed our influences and try to put our own spin on things. And that's how bands are influenced to write music, is they write what they love. And that was the sole intent of this band, because we all of us in On Earth came from bands that had local, semi-local success, but nothing really that big at all. And so we really started Unearth just to solely write music that we wanted to hear 100%. And it wasn't like that. Oh, we like this song, but let's just write this part for the crowd. Like we just wrote that first EP and the first record, like 100% just for us. Like let's just write music that we're only fans of. And I think that's what our earlier bands were missing all along, was maybe people didn't hear the passion in it, because maybe it wasn't 100% what the band was, wanted to hear. So when you write music that you really want to hear, people hear that. They hear the passion. They hear that fire. And it led to a lot of early success for us. And it kind of helped us put our stamp on the metal and hardcore world. And we were lucky enough to be part of a whole scene of bands that kind of shot up in the ranks in metal and hardcore. And we're still lucky enough to be here today.
Oh yeah, man. I always thought it was super interesting because it's like, obviously people are writing music because they love it, right? Like eventually, once things kind of take off and a genre gets established, you start to get bands that are kind of just trying to like fit into that niche. But there's always that like first wave of bands, right? That first wave of bands that like really kind of sets the stage for a lot of other bands to come. And I feel like Unearth is definitely one of those bands for like the metalcore scene, and it's always that like phenomenon has always kind of fascinated me, where it's like, you guys are making this music because you love it, and then there's still these other bands from like all over the country, even all over the world, that are making like similarly styled music. Obviously probably from listening to the same influences and having those same kind of things, kind of seep into their writing, from the generation prior. And so it's just always so cool to me when it's like that synchronicity, you know what I mean? That it's almost like serendipitous how you have all these different bands kind of like on the same page without even knowing it, like all over the world, and then you get this cool genre movement and this whole like uprising of this new style of music. It's fucking pretty special. So I always thought that was a cool thing.
It was a lot of fun at the time, and it was funny because we didn't even get accepted that quickly in the Boston scene.
Yeah.
We all grew up like just in the outskirts, about 10 miles outside of Boston. We had our local shows, which were great, but the Boston scene didn't really take us in for minutes. But we were doing shows in Maine, Vermont, Montreal, in Connecticut, and then finally we started playing the bars in Boston, because at the time, even still today, it's hard to get an all ages show in Boston. So for young band, it's hard to play a 21 plus gig.
Yeah.
So we kind of got our go outside of Boston, but eventually we dug our claws in there.
That's so sick, man. To be a fly on the wall. I mean, I guess I kind of sort of was, but I was pre-touring age in like 2001. I was like 13, and I was like just getting into metal, you know what I mean? Like just getting into the the like metal starter pack bands, right? Like more like new metal stuff and like Metallica and all that kind of stuff that had been around since like the 80s. But it wasn't really until I was 15, 16, I'd say, and the metalcore movement was kind of in like full swing, that I started getting exposure to a lot of these bands, and seeing the guys that were from my area, because I live in San Diego, so there were a ton of metalcore bands coming out.
Nice town.
Oh yeah. But well, speaking of playing shows and touring and all that kind of stuff, you guys have built a following overseas that has allowed you to keep chugging along over the years, even when touring opportunities in the U.S. might not be around. What do you think is the importance, or at least a strategy of some kind of thing for international touring? Because it's like, man, it took, speaking from personal experience, our first European tour, that shit breaks the bank, man. Because it's like you start touring in a new market, and it's almost like going back to the beginning, where it's like you haven't really played shows here yet. You kind of have to prove your worth and earn your salt and do all that kind of shit. And so, keeping that in mind, along with like travel expenses and all the other overhead that comes with touring, I guess what was your experience like with that when Unearth first started kind of going overseas and developing that overseas crowd that was really into the more like Swedish side of the metalcore influenced kind of stuff?
Well, our first tour in Europe was 2002,
Yeah.
and we were lucky enough to be on a couple of like mini festivals. But it was mostly just it was more in the hardcore world. It was us and a band called Liar, a straight vegan band from Belgium. Great dudes, great band, and they did pretty well at the time. So we were kind of lucky to have a decent tour, but it wasn't a big tour. Played 100 cap rooms, 150, but there was some shows that were fest 400 or 500 people, and so that was a big deal for us. But there was no pay. We were in a minivan, and we slept in the clubs most nights. Sometimes at the promoter's house. We lost money on the tour, but it was a great experience to go. We kind of like figured out going into the tour. We're going to Europe for 3.5 weeks. We're going to lose money, but this is how we have to get our feet wet and get our name out there. And we did well. I mean, I think the tour did well for us. It turned some heads. We didn't get invited back for almost 2 years after that, when we were on Metal Blade, and things were a lot better at that. For us at that point. But even so, I mean, to this day, I mean, if you want to play aggressive music, you can't expect it to be like Kush at all. Like there was a picture going around the internet this week. It was us on tour about 12 years ago. And it was at the tail end of the March album cycle. And it was like a 2-week run in the summer in a van. And it was brutal, dude. Like, dudes were sleeping on the ground. This fast food bags everywhere. It just looked like total shit. And dudes just dudes are blowing out. And so, I mean, there's ups and downs the whole time that you do this style of music. I mean, you can try to write, more pop friendly songs and take your chances at it getting, more of a solid money making career at this. But if you want to stick to your guns, just play the music that you want to play and stay heavy and aggressive the whole time, then there's going to be ups and downs. But for us, it's been worth it. It's just 23 years and counting. And, we're writing a record now. The band seems as fired up as always. And we can't wait to start playing shows again.
Hell yeah, man. That's so funny that you mentioned it. Are you talking about that picture that's like the 3 guys in the van and one guy's like on the floor with his legs sticking out?
Yeah.
That's so funny. I had no idea that was you guys.
I guess that's called going viral, but that was 2009. And the guy who took the picture was our merch guy. He's our longtime merch guy. His name was Chris Flynn. Awesome dude. And he was a merch guy from so many years in early to mid 2000s. Then he quit after 2005. He actually sent his resignation letter to us. I think he posted it on MySpace. And then he became an EMT, went back to school, and he came out of retirement to do this tour. It's like, oh, come on, Chris, it'll be fun. And it was pretty fucking shot. It wasn't a good tour. And now, no joke, that dude's now a doctor. I'd like to think that we helped him help people.
That's awesome.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, but totally.
He's an actual doctor in Seattle, the Seattle area. One of the greatest dudes on the planet. But there's Bubble from All Our Mains in that picture. Dave Stauble's in that picture. He's kind of a dude that's made some solid moves after that. But yeah, man, it was a weird tour, but still fun. Still good memories.
I feel like the shittiest ones always have the best memories, but that could just be my experience. It's always I feel like you have to really latch on to the good parts and form those good memories when you're just eating shit every day.
you're almost forced to make memories where, let's say you're on a tour bus, everyone's comfortable, right? And you're tired. So you go to your bunk or you put on a movie in the back lounge. What kind of memories are those?
Yeah.
If you're eating shit, eating KFC, you have a 12-hour ride for a show that's going to be 200 people or less. And it's just you give all your energy for that show and it's repeat the next day. That's where you make memories.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
No, it's not glamorous at all.
No way. Dude, that picture gives me fucking anxiety just looking at it. I'm fucking... because the caption that's along with it, for those of you watching who haven't seen the picture, it's like bands, man, I can't wait to get back out on the road and go on tour. And then it's just the tour, and it's just that picture of these dudes crammed in this fucking dirty ass van. And I'm just I see the picture and I'm yep, That's
But
gonna be
it makes
me
you. I
before
think
too
that
long.
makes you enjoy playing the gig that much
Yeah,
more.
yeah.
Whereas if you're in this coach bus and everyone's comfortable and
Uh,
oh, I don't want to go on stage,
yeah.
Family Feud's on. I got these chicken wings. But like
uh,
you got no place to go, man. You're raring to fire it up on that stage.
yeah, ready to get the fuck out of the dirty ass van. That is for sure. Be like, oh, this venue doesn't smell great, but it smells better than the fucking van. That's awesome,
We're,
man.
we're we're all on the road for the gig anyway, so that just
Yes,
kind of adds extra incentive.
exactly. So, on tour and off tour, merch is an important thing. Uh, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you're working with Luke Buckby as part of Downright Merch, right?
Yeah, I just started
Um,
working there 3 weeks ago, man.
that is awesome. So band merch, I've always kind of considered Unearth like a merch band, right? Like there's certain bands where the merch just like really hits, and you like always see people wearing their shirts. I feel like Black Dahlia is another one of those bands where it's just like you can count on any metalhead having like a Black Dahlia shirt in their wardrobe, and I feel like Unearth is kind of the same way. Um,
I think it depends on the record. I mean, we'll have certain records where we see, like, let's say I'll go to a show as a fan. Um, I'll see Under shirts more at certain shows than if it's during a certain album cycle or not. So it kind of just depends on how the record hits.
right.
But we've had some album cycles where our merch does so well. And it also depends on the actual design. If you have if you have cool designs, people actually want to wear them.
Yeah.
So bands are always searching for that. Always trying. Sometimes they don't.
Well, so what have you guys kind of done to make sure that your merch ducks are always kind of in a row? It's like you mentioned, obviously the music is going to have a big part of it. It's like if certain albums hit better than other albums, people are going to be more interested in repping the merch and, being a part of the community and the band and stuff. But, and you mentioned designs, which is like the elusive dragon of being in a fucking band running merch. Is just like, oh, is this design good? I don't know. I would wear it. Would a metal fan wear it? I'm a metal fan. I would wear this. Sure. And then you put it out and it's just a fucking flop. Um, yeah. So
Yeah, man, you have to find a designer that understands the band,
yeah,
that you can trust, and that people take to. In our early days, Bill Scoville, bassist from One King Down, who's at Merch now. I think he's still there. He was really in tune with what our fans wanted. So a lot of our early day shirts that sold the best, he was the one who made them. But over the years, man, we've fought tirelessly over designs. Like I'll love something, but Ken will hate it, or vice versa.
yeah,
And so some designs that one of us thinks is good, or Buzz, or anyone in the band thinks is good, might not make the cut because someone's passionate that they hate it that much.
right.
So it's not as ruthless as writing a record, but it is a form of our art. So people do get pretty animated about it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I find that struggle because kind of like a cross band thing, and it's funny that you kind of gave a little insight there on like how the band politics of Unearth work, because I know that every band has like a different like. I feel so fortunate to be in a 5-person band because we can do votes on shit where it's like a majority rule kind of thing. So it's like, okay, there's 2 people hate it and 2 people love it. What's the tiebreaker gonna say? And then it's just like you just go with whatever the majority goes for.
We're 5 as well, but our bassist now is Chris O'Toole. Chris O'Toole, he's awesome. But before that, our bass player was John Maggard, Slow, everyone called him. Yeah. And he's so neutral that every time we had a 2-2 tie, I don't know, man. Yeah. I don't have a vote. Come on, dude. Pick a side, bro. Love you, Slow, if you watch.
Man. I love that shit. It's always interesting, man. It's always interesting to see how those inner machinations work and all that kind of stuff. But getting back to merch, so it's like I find that a lot of bands. I recently had a conversation with someone who runs a pretty big merch company, and something he said. Actually, I don't have to be all fucking cloak and dagger about it. It was on this series. It was Kareem Peter of Night Shift merch, and when we were talking about stuff, we were like, okay, so like you run all this merch, you print all these items, like what's the weirdest item that you've sold that like has done well, and what do you think like the best item to print is? And he was like, yeah, all this weird shit. But at the bottom line, he was like, shirts always sell best, uh, because that's just what people want. Have you found that to be kind of true in your experience, or have you like ever printed off something, super fucking wacky and off the wall that has just like just stuck with people, that was just like selling out of it every night kind of thing?
Um, he's right. Shirts are what sell the most. I mean,
Yeah.
we've tried basically everything. I think most recently we tried coffee mugs, and what I thought was a funny thing because I thought it was cool. It was a really cool design. It was a van, like an old school like VW van that was on fire, and it said back in the rig to take another swig. That was Buzz's idea. I thought it looked great, but then so you just mentioned I'm working at Downright. I get there, and in their cupboards are all the ones that people didn't buy. So now, these are the coffee cups that people are drinking out of at Downright because people didn't buy this fucking mug that I thought was cool.
Yeah.
And we brought them on tour, and like I think we brought 50 on tour. I think we brought home like 30. So that's not an item people want. You'll sell dozens, if not more than that, multiple dozens or whatever a night in cloth items. But sometimes the accessories don't sell that well. But off the top of my head, I can't think of an accessory that sold that well.
Yeah.
But if to put on your fan hat, if it's like 1997, I'm going to a Pantera show.
Right.
Am I going to buy a Pantera mug? Maybe, but it's not my first purchase. I'm going to buy the shirt.
Right.
I want the concert tee.
Right.
Because I'm going to wear that. I'm going to wear it proudly to school, to work, wherever. And you don't have that mug with you there. So it's if you are passionate about a band enough to buy the merchandise, you're going to want to display it to people. And a little trinket isn't going to do that.
Yep. That's a good way to look at it. That's a really an enlightened perspective, I would say, is like putting on that fan hat and kind of being like, look, this is me at this show X amount of years ago. Would I buy this item? And if you say no, then fuck it, don't make it. But I think we did like drawstring bags one year for a tour, and the thing about those that it was kind of like because it was like people buy 3 or 4 shirts and then they don't have anything to fucking put them in, so it's like, oh, we'll spend an extra $5 on this drawstring backpack thing. It's got our logo on it, you can just throw your shit in there. And that was a good one. Those sold well, but I don't think it was because people wanted the bag. I think it was because they were like, oh, you're right, I don't have anywhere to hold my shit. I just bought 2 CDs and 2 t-shirts.
The convenience item. I mean, if you're smart about stuff, like I say that, but we thought we were smart. We did. It was either Mayhem. I think it was Mayhem, or maybe it was Warped Tour. And we made a bunch of ponchos. So, man, what if it fucking rains?
Uh-huh.
Ponchos cost like $1 or $2 to make. Charge them for $5. It's cheap, right? People are gonna buy a poncho. It like rained once, so we didn't sell ponchos. We sold ponchos like one day.
Yeah.
Next time we said this, we had boxes of ponchos for years. Now I think we tossed them eventually, or gave them away or something.
Yeah,
we have actually given boxes of merch to Salvation Army before.
Oh, that's right.
It's like, what are we gonna do with these? Like, all right, let's bring them there. People at least wear them.
Yeah. I find that those leftover merch accessories are always good for giveaways. You know what I mean? Just here you go, fucking best video of someone playing this one of our songs gets a fucking grab bag or some shit. Here's all the shit we couldn't sell on tour.
Or pull the old trick, like remember Ray Mazzola from Full Blown Chaos would take the shirt and throw it to the person who we thought like won the pit for that song or something.
Yeah.
I'm paraphrasing. I forget exactly how it went back in the day, but he would do stuff like that. And a bunch of bands have done that. Oh, and he had a football. Whoever brought the football back to the stage after the song got the shirt.
That's fucking rad. That's sick. That's a good idea. It's a.
Hope I'm not confusing the story.
No, that's good.
I think that is. I think it was Ray who did that. He was a great pit caller. He is a great pit caller.
Yeah. We used to do this thing where if we had like, because sometimes you get down to like the bottom of a barrel of a merch design, you have like one left in 3 different sizes, right? And so instead of just like displaying that one every night with like the piece of tape on it that says like sold out in small, medium, XL, fucking all this shit, we would just kind of like, roll them up, tape them up, bring them on side stage, and then just kind of like toss them out to the crowd. But what would end up happening is like someone would catch one and then they'd bring it up after merch or after the show to the merch table and be like, "Hey, this isn't my size. Could I get a different one?" I'd be like, "No, man, we know that's the last one. That's why I threw it out of the fucking. Come on, like, yeah, it's pretty good."
Do you think people do that at sporting events? Like if you've ever been to a hockey game when they have that like
Yeah,
can
the fucking
they shoot out their shirts?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Boston Bruins, you shot me the wrong size.
uh, I guess there's nowhere to go. That's our fault for being at merch, being like having our fucking merch table right where everyone can see it.
That's why my merch guys retire.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Dealing with those guys. Fucking so. Another interesting question that I have here, which I'm actually super interested to hear about. So, working with Terry Date on 3 in the Eyes of Fire, I would love to hear what a guy who has worked on legendary albums brought to the table, and if it was very difficult to follow up, the Oncoming Storm, and not only Terry Date, but you guys have worked with, people like Adam D and Will Putney. What has it been like working with all these different producers? I know that sometimes bands kind of just like find their guy and stick with them forever. But I feel like other bands kind of are like, well, this album, we wrote this album and it kind of more fits this sound, so we should find a producer to like cater to this kind of thing. What's your thought process like when working with different producers, and do you have one that you've kind of like stuck with more than others and all that kind of stuff?
Most of our records, it's tough to say most now, but we've done the bulk of our work with Adam D.
Okay.
So he did our first full-length record, The Stings of Conscience, which came out actually 20 years ago this year. So he was a young producer at the time. Killswitch had just started. That was our first full-length. So we were very comfortable with him. So a year later, we did our EP called Endless. And then 2 years later, we did the Oncoming Storm. So the first like 3 real recordings we had were with Adam. So he was, at that time, we called him our, the sixth member of our band. But things were really happening for us at the time, and the band was doing really well. We getting a lot of opportunities, selling a bunch of records and tickets. It was a lot of fun, and we got some pressure to work with different producers. So we had a few meetings, and Terry Date seemed to be the guy that made the most sense. Just because of his body work, and when he actually came to meet us, he was really down to earth and ultra cool. And he wanted to work with us and just kind of work with our ideas and get the best out of those ideas for that record, because we were going for a really raw live sound on that record, and he had done work like that previous. So, for instance, for most of that record, I used an SM58 mic, which is usually just a live mic. And you can tell when you hear the record, it's more of a high pitch sound, not from my actual vocals, but from the actual mic. It sounds like a live mic, and it actually was. And for about half the record, I sang through floor monitors like you would see on stage. So it was more of a live setting. A bunch of drum parts were just played straight through. Instead of me doing any punches on vocals, I would do 2, 3, 4, 5 lines in a row, and then I'd stop. And I'd do that 3 times, and we'd never punch. We just take the best 3, 4 line take that there was. So we tried to get the live element. And Terry really was excellent at harnessing that, and I loved working with him because he got me fired up. He would ask me about the lyrics, ask me what they meant to me. And he just was almost like a coach. He fired me up to go sing the song. And I really enjoyed working with Terry a lot. I know the guitar players were a little bit more used to working with Adam, because Adam's also a guitar player, bassist and drummer. He does it all. So they felt a little out of place at first, but I think everyone finally settled in. We lived in Seattle for 7 weeks. So that was a little strange that we were out of our home element. But I think that lent, something to that record. I think it gives it a different vibe than our other albums, because we were taken away from home, and we lived that record, and we were together 24/7. I roomed with our old drummer, Mike Justin. Every night after we got done at the studio, we stayed at the studio all together for 7 weeks, And every night after we got done, we went to a diner called the Hurricane. And yeah, we just got grub, some beers, and went to bed, woke up in the morning to repeat. It was a totally different experience than any other album. But the record after, we went back to Adam and on the March, because we love Adam so much. And then went back to him again on Darkness and the Light. So we've done most of our records with Adam, but after that, we finally we switched it up. We went to Mark Lewis for Watches Rule. He's awesome too.
Yeah.
And I remember I was having kind of a tough time with my voice, that record, to get it warmed up properly, and I couldn't get it all done up here because he flew up here to do the record. So I ended up going to Florida twice, and he put me up in his place, and I finished the record down there. So he's very hospitable. He's a excellent producer and gentleman. And then the last record we did with Will Putney. He's awesome. I loved every second of working with Will. Shane Frisbee also was on that record. He tracked a few I tracked a few songs of vocals with him as well. So it's we've been kind of all over the place. Adam has been kind of our anchor the whole time. But every producer we've worked with has helped make each record sound the way it does, and has been almost like a six member for each album. So we go into a record. We are part producer, but we also fully put our trust in the producer we hired for that record. So everyone that worked on the record has their stamp on each record.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. That's super cool to hear. It's like, because I've worked with a few different producers myself, and it's like you said, they all bring kind of their own different vibe to it. That coach thing that you were talking about with Terry Date, that's a super cool thing. I would, I have the guy I work with now, that Allegiant works with, Dave Otero. He does kind of a similar thing where it's like he wants the lyrics in front of him. He wants to but it's more for like dynamic reference, right? Where he's like, yeah, this lyric though, like, is sick, and like it hits super hard, and it like finishes off the verse like super cool. So maybe like put a little bit more like fucking snarl on it when you get that shit in there. And I always thought that was a really cool touch. But it would be super cool to fucking have a producer in the booth being like, so what does this mean to you? Like, why did you write this? Get fucking pumped about it. So that's a fucking...
That's exactly what he did. And also, I mean, he had me set up like the control room, not the control room, the actual performance room, as like a living room. He told me to make it comfortable for me. And so they had like the soundproof walls. I just drag them over, the dividers, and I had a couch, like a lamp, put a little carpet there, because I was really comfortable doing that record. That was all his idea, man. So, and he'd worked with Chino and Rob Zombie and stuff. So he had ideas of what he told me how they became comfortable. He said that Chino would drink port wine, so I tried that, but it didn't work for me.
Yeah.
I usually drink beer in the studio. It's just like you kind of sip it a little bit, kind of coats the throat. But whatever. He just gave me all ideas that other guys did, and I tried to kind of find my own comfort zone there, and it definitely worked.
That's fucking rad, man. That's super cool. Well, speaking of writing stuff and hitting the studio and working with producers, you mentioned a little earlier that you guys are working on a new album. How I feel like a lot of bands are writing right now because 2020 was a wash for touring. No one was out fucking doing anything, so a lot of people were just like, well, might as well make a record. Was that kind of the case for you guys, or did you, what kind of kept you inspired and got you guys writing?
Not at first, man, because we toured right up until the pandemic. We did we headlined a tour in Europe.
Yeah.
And the last show was February 29th, and in Europe it took off. We were in Europe and it was taking off. So we the first show was 13th or 14th, and the last show was the 29th, and we flew on March 1st. But as we were there, like, it started getting crazy. Like, they started closing borders. We played Milan on February 22nd, and it was the last show. I believe it was the last tour that came through, because 2 days later, the Testament, Exodus, Death Angel tour got canceled because of COVID. They were the 24th to the 22nd, but our show, I mean, it was a dismal gig, but we played, our whole package played, and the people that were there had fun. But it was a really eerie time in that city that night. And I didn't expect it to hit that hard. We had toured in 2003 through SARS. I think it was 2010 through MERS.
Yeah.
So like we toured through epidemics, but this pandemic came on really quickly. And so by the end of the tour, like, so we played Berlin like 2 or 3 days before the last show, and our booking agent, Mark from MAD, he came out and he told us, because everyone's starting to kind of get a little weird, not panic, but like start to feel a little weird, just see what's going around with borders closing and everything, worried about getting home. And he comes to the show in Berlin. He's like, the last 5 shows of this tour, I've had to get permission from the German government, because they're keeping an eye on every show to see what the numbers are like, to see if they have to cancel. So we had 1 more show left. That's right, and it was in Chemnitz. He's like, I'll have to call you guys tomorrow to tell you guys if it's gonna happen. And I'm like, fuck, man, like this is really serious. So, long story short, and we had to fly home. We all expected to be questioned heavily at the border at home, but we weren't. Everyone just could freely go, which I thought was a little bizarre, just by the level of what we saw in Europe. But when we got here, it wasn't so bad yet. In the U.S., people weren't freaking out yet. But that, I think that kind of burned us out a little bit. And plus, I mean, we were kind of approaching the end of the album cycle anyway. It had already been out for close to a year and a half, had been recorded for almost a full 2 years. So it was almost a natural time for us to kind of take a step away anyway. Yeah. Because we worked really heavily on that last record. The record created a lot of good opportunities for us. So we did take a step back. I did a couple of podcasts and I tried to really get out there, but I kind of realized that for myself, like, man, I just kind of wanted to break and kind of focus on being with my family. So we all kind of did that for a while, but just naturally the past few months we started trading ideas. I even took a break from posting on our socials for a long time, because when I just figured if there's nothing really to post about the band, if there's no news, why clog up people's news feeds with old posts? Each band can, of course, does their own thing and sees it their own way. That was just my view. But now we're finally moving again. We have a bunch of songs in the Dropbox, just ideas, and a lot, like, it's finally starting to make sense. The songs, the structures are really strong. Some really sick riffs and beats happening, and I've got all kinds of vocal flows going. So it feels like the natural progression of how we write a record. It's really refreshing to feel that again.
Hell yeah, dude. Well, I am, for one, super fucking excited to hear that. I've been a fan of you guys since I was a wee lad, so every album I feel brings something new to the fold. So I'm fucking very stoked to.
We tried, man. I can tell you already that it's always going to sound like Unearth, but there's something different to it, and there's some cool melodic guitar stuff, but also like insanely heavy stuff. So well, what we have now, I think it's gonna be a fun record.
Oh yeah, man. That's the way to do it. I feel like a lot of bands make kind of like a misstep in the whole thing, because it's like you don't want to just release the same record 10 times, right? That's never a good look. It gets boring after 2 or 3. But then at the same time, it's like you don't want to pivot too hard in one direction that like alienates your fans and makes you just sound like a different band. So I find that like keeping that core sound intact while like still giving yourself the freedom to like be creative and experimental and like have fun with it, so that you're not just like, oh, time to write another album that sounds like one of our albums kind of thing, is always really important. And I think that I think enough people in bands listen to and watch this podcast for that to be a relevant thing to bring up, where it's just like, write your music, do your thing, obviously put what you love before what you think people's expectations of you are going to be, but at the same time it's like keep that core, man, keep that center focused, so that all the things that branch off from it still represent like a greater thing that you've kind of established for yourself. Fucking, so it's exciting.
I also think that the longer a band is around, you also have to push your creativity. So I'm open to trying new things, as long as we don't feel like we're compromising our sound or our integrity, or being viewed as a sellout. I'd like to try just different sounds in the metal and hardcore world and just kind of branch out and see what we can do. Um, I don't want to put anything on the table here, but I just want to explore different sounds of metal and hardcore and just kind of see what we can find as new strengths that we haven't done before. Um, I think that's what will keep bands relevant and keep it fun for the band itself.
Yeah. Well, that gets me even more fucking hyped because I fucking hearing more of that fucking new shit. That's what I've been all about, man. I'm so
We
excited
tried
to see
last record, man. We actually for a few songs we brought in DL, formerly of Vacation Strand, to kind of
yeah.
he and Ken worked together on a few songs to kind of give Ken a different perspective of how to write a heavy riff, and they had a few sessions together, and we got a few good songs out of their sessions. I of course wrote the lyrics and the vocals, and Nick the drums, and we all put in our say at the end. But Ken brought some different stuff to the table that maybe Ken wouldn't have brought to before. I'm not saying we're going to bring a different writer in this time again. It was cool to have a fresh look at Unearth from like a different person. Like, hey, you guys should try something like this, and then he just kind of came up with stuff, and it made it fun. It's cool.
I always encourage people to take lessons. That's like my big thing is I'm just like, bro, if you hit like a wall, and I learned this from my guitar player because it's something that he does. He's like, yeah, dude, if I hit like a creative like brick wall, I'll just go take a lesson from like one of my like a person that's like one of our peers who I like think is a really sick guitar player and kind of like just get a new perspective on shit. And I've started doing that where it's like if I'll hit, like I'll try to learn a new vocal technique that's based off of something that this one person does that I really like, but I want to put my own like flavor to it or whatever. I'll just like hit that person up and be like, hey, I'll give you like 50, $60. Let's hang out for half an hour, 45 minutes and go over some vocal stuff. And I feel like getting that, that little, light from the window into like the room that is your band or your technique or your style is always a really good way to like keep things fresh and keep things interesting. And it provides a cool kind of like, I think that a lot of music scenes, right? Like some of the bigger ones that have ever happened in rock music. You look at like the late 60s or even like the early 90s. A lot of these bands and a lot of these people that were in these bands all knew each other on like a personal level and would like work with each other all the time. And I feel like in metal, that's like kind of been lost a little bit where it's like everybody's kind of like isolated doing their own thing. And so I feel like when you like reach out to someone and are like, hey, I'm doing this song, like help me write some sick shit for this, it like creates that kind of community and you get that like universal style with individual creativities kind of applied to it. Fucking
It creates better music, man. Like so many classic songs they were collaborations, but it was still might have the band name on it, but that musician was also part of it. And it's and people start talking about that as time goes on. Fans pay attention to that, and it catches up in history. People understand it, and that stuff is important. Just kind of it's almost like an extended family out here with players and writers, performers. So it's good that you're saying that, man. I think more bands should do that, and I have seen kind of an influx of more guest appearances on records the past few years. Yeah. And I'm all about that too. I'd love to bring in some of my favorite vocalists to do a guest spot on the record or something. I just did one for a band called Arm for Apocalypse. So they did a record with Kurt Ballou in Salem in October, and They asked me to come down and put down some vocals. And it's not a lot. It's just a few parts of the song, but it's really fun to be part of it. And I love that band.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, I've been doing a lot of guest spots myself, working on some new projects and just collabing, man. That's what it's all about. And I feel like with the direction that the music industry is going, where like the kind of more traditional model, right, of like, okay, you make an album, you release 3 singles, and then you tour on the album, is like it's still there, but I feel like a lot more bands are kind of drifting more towards the like, let's just make 15 songs and release a single every month for 6 or 7 months, and then if we've made more songs by then, let's just like add on to the pile. And like it's not that you don't release albums, you eventually release all these things as like one kind of big collective, but I feel like people are kind of drifting more towards this like singles method of releasing stuff because now that streaming is like the main medium for consumption, it's, just kind of makes more sense. But it's cool because that offers up so much more, where it's like people will just hit you up and be like, hey, we're working on this song that we're going to release in a couple months, versus like, hey, we're working on this album that we're going to release
Right.
in a year. You know what I mean? So it's like when you do a guest spot nowadays, it's cool because it's like it comes out relatively quickly. And so it's still like a fresh representation of, your style and what the band is doing. And yeah, man, it's cool. It's a brave new world. I feel like metal's kind of finally starting to come around to, this streaming culture, and the way things are kind of turning out to be in the musical release industry. So it's
Yeah,
fucking
I mean
fun.
that was weird for us because we were right at the tail end of when we started to hit our stride in the early 2000s. That's when album sales started to be on the decline, but it was still the barometer for how popular your band was.
Oh yeah.
And so we'd sold a lot of records, but now that no one really cares about how many records you sell. It's really what I mean. Stream numbers are important, but it's really what your ticket sales are and your social media numbers. That kind of dictates the size of the band. And right now, I mean, things can change anytime. What's going to happen next? But I found that our entire career we've had to continue to pivot and change and adapt to the world around us, and it's at times it hasn't been easy. And like I've told a story before, Buzz has told before. It has nothing to do with record sales. Remember in 2007 we were on tour, and our whole career had always used MapQuest directions, but for probably a 3-year block of time we're mostly in a bus. Fast forward to the end of 2007, we're at the tail end of our album cycle for In the Eyes of Fire, and we're going to go away for 6 months, write a record. Let's make as much money as we can, have a great tour. And the opener on that tour was Suicide Silence. They were just coming up, and like we had this stupid fucking book of MapQuest directions, and then we pulled up the show, and I think it was Mark, he just gave Buzz. He's like, hey, just take this. We have 2 of them. It was a GPS. Like, this is our backup. Just take this one. Like, what is this thing? And we weren't even old, but like we felt old because man, we're so out of the loop, man. Things change so quick. Now the social media platforms are changing every day. So I'm glad the big 3 now are kind of a fixture for bands. I can't even fucking say that, man, because Twitch is huge, and
fucking TikTok now too. Fucking
TikTok, which we don't have an account. I remember everyone's getting on Snapchat for a minute, but we didn't bite. I might sound like an idiot, but I don't know if that's a thing that kids care about for bands or people care about for bands. But
yeah,
we focus on. I probably sound like a fool, but we focus on the Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Because those are the main 3 that we seem to get the most feedback on. But I know we're gonna, we will have to continue to have to adjust.
Yeah. Well, it's also about like the demographic, right? Where it's like those 3 have a wide enough demographic where it's like you're gonna find an audience that gives a shit about metal on those. It's like if a metal band makes a TikTok, you know what I mean? Like it's hit or miss unless you're like making widely relatable content. Like you don't see a whole lot of TikTok channels that are like metal centric that do well, because the TikTok demographic is mostly like the Zoomer, Gen Z, kind of kids, and they don't fucking listen to metal. So it's like, you end up with this.
I think there'll always be a scene. I mean, I still see kids wearing Metallica shirts, like 12-year-old kids wearing Metallica shirts. So it's still like there's still the same starter pack bands, but they'll there's different ones that are mixed in there. But the big 4 are definitely still. I mean, those are my starter bands.
Yeah.
When I was 12, and they're still the starter bands. I mean, because that's a testament to how good those bands are.
It is.
But and how accessible and they can be while being so heavy. But I think they'll always be fans of metal, and it's clear, man. We just did a tour in Europe last year, and it was ridiculously massive. 4,000 people a day, and it was just extreme metal bands. And it's like, man, this is insane that this music this heavy can draw this kind of crowd. And I thought the same thing. We toured Slipknot in 2007, I think it was, and sure, they have a couple, handful of songs on the radio that do well, but the bulk of their material is pretty extreme. Yeah, there's new metal parts in it, but it's extreme new metal.
Yeah.
They're really fucking heavy band. And I was like, man, these guys are drawing 7, 8, 9,000 people a night. It's pretty bizarre, you know. But so I don't think metal's going anywhere.
Yeah, no way. I don't think metal's going anywhere. I was more just kind of speaking to like the platforms where metal is popular. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
because metal's, you're exactly right. It's never going to go anywhere. Metal's that need to connect to something extreme is always going to be something that people seek out. You know what I mean? Is always going to be something that metal is going to fill a niche for in the arts. And you know, it's been such a huge part of musical history for so long that like it's like you said, there's always going to be those kids wearing those Metallica and Slayer and Megadeth shirts. You know what I mean? But I just feel like a lot of the kids that spend their afternoons watching TikTok videos aren't digging through it trying to find the sick riffs and fucking breakdowns and shit like they dig through Instagram and Facebook to find kind of the same thing. But
that's definitely on well, I think that people do dig through it on Instagram, but
yeah,
I don't know. I've never even opened the app TikTok, man, because I get other things. I don't know. Yeah, man, it's we'll have to adjust, and I see us having to do, or I shouldn't say having to do, but adapting and doing maybe some Twitch stuff, or I'm really trying to push the dudes to do a live stream.
Yeah,
but it's difficult because our drummer lives in Washington State and our bassist lives in Texas, so it's we have to fly them here, and then with current quarantine rules, they have to get a test or quarantine 14 days, and everyone's got jobs now. Everyone's had to kind of have a pivot because we can't tour, so it's kind of a pain in the ass, but we're really itching to do it and really want to perform, because man, it's been almost a whole year, and we haven't gone a whole year of without playing a gig since we started in '98. So that's a long fucking time, and even before that, we were all in bands before that. So I don't think I've gone a whole year without playing a gig since I started playing gigs, and I think I played my first one in '94 when I was a little kid.
Damn.
So it's a long fucking time.
Yeah.
So I'm almost 30 years of playing shows every year consistently. And we have not in 11 months now. So I think it's time.
Hell yeah. Getting down to it. I'm excited to have some stuff on the books, even though it's not until later this year. You know what I mean? It's just like knowing that it's there just makes me like, oh, just get there already. Like
a live stream or a show?
No, like actual shows. Yeah. Fucking got stuff on. We have a Euro thing that we got announced November, I want to say November, December, with our friends in Archspire and Rivers and Isle and Black Crown Initiate, and should be a fun one. But
a fun tour. Black Crown Initiate, great dudes. We toured with them years ago.
Oh hell yeah, oh yeah, yeah. But it's like who knows if it'll even happen. But just the idea of it being there and being like sick, we're all committed to this. It's on the books. We're ready to do it. Is like exciting enough for me to be like, okay, it's something to look forward to. It's the return of shows is in the visible, plannable future instead of being like, well, we'll fucking see what happens. So
we are all about it if it can be done safely.
Yeah.
And everyone, the crowd's safe, we're safe. Because, like I said, everyone's working, everyone's out there doing their thing. It seems like everyone's adjusted, wearing masks, social distancing. I'll play a gig if there's, pods of people here and there. Like, we're performers. We want to play.
Yeah.
We also don't want to be reckless. So we're finally, taking offers. We have some stuff late July, early August in Europe that we got offered, and after some internal kind of back and forth, we agreed, like, okay, let's say yes. It's likely not going to happen, but let's say yes and hope it does. Like, what if the vaccine does knock down the numbers fast enough, where things are safe again, and you have to remain optimistic. And if you don't, like our booking agent, Mark, said, if those who fail to try, those who won't try have already failed.
Yes, absolutely.
It's like, all right, well, that's the best thing I've heard about this so far. It's like, let's at least try. If it gets canceled, it gets canceled.
Yeah.
Let's just try. And I heard some people say, well, you're going to tie up a bunch of money from fans. Like, no, that's part of the dialogue with our agent. So that the tickets are normal priced. A lot of the governments in Europe are going to give subsidies to the clubs to reopen, to try to have life be normal again. So this is all hearsay. This might not even happen, but it's like there is dialogue. There are people on all sides trying to make it happen, and I really hope it does happen.
Yeah, and as a band, sorry, go ahead.
This last name was Furnace Fest. We were scheduled for it for this past year. It got moved to May, and last I heard, it just got moved to September.
Right.
I think hopefully that'll happen, man. It's in Alabama. It's the end of the summer when numbers are generally down for any kind of virus, anyways. And I'm really hoping by then that the vaccine will really chop this thing down. But I like to be optimistic, and it might just be a fantasy, but I'm hoping.
Well, what I was gonna say is that it's like it's better to have plans in case things do come back to normal, right? Because it's like you don't want to be that band that's just kind of stuck with your dick in your hand being like, oh, all these other bands are playing shows but we said no because we weren't sure, and all this kind of, and so it's like, it's so much better. Like you said, it's like if you don't try, you've already failed. You have to, at least make the effort to put stuff on the books and, have, like you said, that optimism moving forward in such uncertain times where it's just like,
I've also heard the argument that you don't want to tour when it comes back because there's gonna be so much saturation. It's like, yeah, everyone's gonna want to go to shows. Before, people maybe took it for granted, didn't go to all the shows.
Right.
But that even said, man, I don't care.
Yeah, no, I don't
I just want to play.
There's a marketing term where it's like, are you gonna play in a blue ocean or a red ocean, right? And a red ocean is it's the idea that it's like the consumers are sharks, and if there's blood everywhere, then like, it's a red ocean. There's so much out there that it's like you're just another piece of meat in the red ocean. And I think that applies to certain markets and certain industries, but I don't think that will ever apply to the music industry. Like, I think that especially after something like this, where it's like something that people, like you said, might have taken for granted before, there's like, yeah, there's going to be a lot of bands out there, but they're not going to be a bunch of pieces of meat in a small ocean, because the amount of people that are going to be out there buying tickets to shows and just like swarming to concerts that they may have not gone to 2 years ago is also going to be huge. So it's not just going to be like an uneven scale where it's like, oh, all these bands are touring, but the same amount of people are going to shows. It's going to be like all these bands are touring, but there's going to be tons more people going to shows at the same time. So
they're sick being cooped up, and they're going to be thirsty for live music. They're going to be thirsty for a night out. They're thirsty for a good time.
Yeah.
And like I said, people, may have taken it for granted before. I know I probably missed some shows too, man, going, just, I'll catch them next time. But
yeah,
not always guaranteed next time. And I think, a whole year without any kind of live music is really, and it's going to be longer than that. That kind of reinforces it. Yeah. Yeah, I think people will be thirsty to get out there. And also, I think it's great to be creative right now. I've seen, bands, I love Gate Creeper. They just put out that record. People are thirsty for it, and it's doing a lot of great things for them. The band Spirit Box, a couple of songs, and people are really appreciative that band's being creative right now and really making, it's really doing great things for the bands, and the fans are really appreciative that these bands are being creative now instead of waiting for the next records. I know a lot of bands are waiting for the pandemic to be over, but it takes a lot of guts for a band to put out a record right now where they know there's not going to get many actual physical record sales, but they're going to be noticed, and I think the fans will truly appreciate bands being creative right now. And that's why, I'm happy that we're finally starting to write. Because even if we get out a single in this time, or even do a live stream, I know we probably needed a break, but I do want to be creative and get something out there for people to hear and show them that we do truly care about them. Our fans have been with us for a long time, and we love what we do. Clearly, very much. We've chosen this path for our lives, and I just want to go out there and show them that how much we love it, and keep going and go until we can't go anymore when things are finally back.
Fuck yeah, man. Well, before I let you go, because I've had you here for a while, I don't want to take up your whole evening. I've got a couple questions from some fans. Speaking of, Uh, uh, Jibba Jam 09 wants to know, do you think you'll do another or more beer collaborations for charity?
It's funny. I was talking to Broken Goblet last week about that. So they're about actually to write the check to both chapters of the ACLU, and we're actually talking about doing a T-shirt of that same design that's on the beer can. We also tossed around some other ideas. A bunch of our last record and a lot of our previous records were a touch on climate change and just taking care of the environment in general. And our song "One with the Sun" most directly talks about that. If you see the video and read the lyrics, you kind of get the gist of it. But we were actually in talks with it. I'm not saying it's a done deal, but we're actually talking about last week, kind of just shooting the shit about it. So I like to start doing more things for charity and just kind of keep things moving in a positive direction, whether it's a beer or a T-shirt or what have you.
Hell yeah! I've got one more from Peter Flynn. Do you consider the Red Chord or Heaven Shall Burn to be at least partial pioneers of the metalcore post nu metal movement?
Um, they're both pioneers, but I would say Heaven Shall Burn is definitely the pioneer in the European metalcore movement, and I wouldn't even call the Red Chord metalcore.
Yeah,
I think they're one of the true first deathcore bands.
yeah,
They were doing it before so many others. And Dreaming in Dog Years, I think, is one of the all-time great death grind songs, deathcore songs of all time. That would pylons upon pylons. The song is still catchy today. So both bands are excellent. We were lucky enough to tour with both bands a few times.
hell yeah. Well, dude, thank you so much, man, for hanging out with us. I really appreciate you taking the time, and it's been one of my more interesting interviews. I've
Had a lot
gotten
of fun, man.
a lot of insight, man. Super fucking cool, and I cannot wait to see you guys back on the road and to hear the new music that you're working on.
We should do some shows together, man.
Yeah, fuck yeah, dude. I'm all there for that. Fucking all about that. Super, super into it.
I appreciate your time.
Yeah,
Thank you.
dude. Thank you so much for joining us. For everybody watching, if you don't already, follow Unearth down here at these social media links below. The big three we were talking about: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all hanging out right there. Make sure to give them some love. Keep up with what they're doing, and we'll catch you next time. As always, I am your host, Riley McShane. This has been our guest, Trevor Phipps, Unearth. Until next week, everybody. Peace.